My dear father loved to say, hop to the top of the day. The drops are easy to swallow. My dear father loved to say, mop your tears and mend your sorrows, to not drown your soul wishing for better tomorrows. You want to think bright, you want to think right. A star falling. Those, of course, are the song stylings of Ewan McGregor. And who doesn't rush out to buy the new Ewan McGregor record whenever he puts one out? No, actually, it turns out he can actually sing. I would not have guessed that. All right, and that is, in fact, from the new Pinocchio, the Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, one of 3 animated movies we're going to talk about today. The others being Puss in Boots and Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. 2 of these movies are based on old Italian folk tales or fairy tales or children's novels. One of them is definitely not an old Italian folk tale or a fairy tale. And there's many other ways to talk about these in conjunction with one another. And also separately, we're going to do all of that. Did I say that all 3 of these are nominated for the Best Animation Oscar, Best Animated Film Oscar? And here to talk about all of them are Carolyn Payne, actress, comedian, dancer, founder, director, and choreographer of Kinetic Dance, and also manager of the career of her personal cat, Harry, who does look a little bit like the cat in Puss in Boots. Irene Papoulis teaches writing at Trinity College. Pedro Soto is president and CEO of High Grade Precision Technologies, making a rare appearance on our show for an episode with no Star Wars tie-in. But it's all good. It's all great. And we're going to talk about all these movies. We will start with Del Toro's Pinocchio. It is stop motion animation, but it's like stop motion animation at a very elite and possibly unprecedented level because it's Guillermo del Toro. Let's hear a little bit of dialogue here. You can hear some of the premise of the movie being established by the aforementioned Ewan McGregor, who plays the cricket, the non-Jiminy cricket, basically, and Tilda Swinton, who plays both the Blue Angel and the Wood Sprite. Here she is the Wood Sprite. And I think actually technically Tilda Swinton is a wood sprite. She's acting when she plays, other things. All right, here we go with A1.
May I ask, who on earth are you?
On Earth, a guardian. I care for the little things, the forgotten things, the lost ones.
Well, I am Sebastian J. Cricket, homeowner, and I have every right to be consulted about your schemes and machinations regarding my property.
Well, since you already live in the heart of the wooden boy, perhaps you can help me.
Help you what?
To watch over him, guide him to be good.
I'm not a governess, madam. I'm a novelist, a raconteur, currently immersed in writing my memoirs.
Well, in this world, you get what you give. Take on this responsibility, and I will grant you one wish.
And that could be anything. Anything at all. The publication of my book. Fame? Fortune?
Anything.
Oh, maybe I can help. I'll try my best, and that's the best anyone can do. That's rather clever, isn't it?
So wishes are one of the enduring themes on the movies that we're talking about today. So Irene Papoulis, get us started here. I'm asking you because I know that the Del Toro Pinocchio may have a slight edge as your favorite among the 3 that we watched.
And the more I think about it, the bigger an edge it has. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a beautiful expression of the power of disobedience. Disobedience as opposed to obedience, and how disobedience can be a force for good in the world. In contrast to I think about the Disney. As a child, I loved the Disney Pinocchio because I always wanted to be a really good girl, and he was a good model for. At least that's how I remember it. I don't remember it that clearly, but I remember you shouldn't lie and all those kind of values. And this one turned that around in a way that is kind of about, for me, the more I think about it, Ukraine, this is the first anniversary of the war beginning, and the idea of fighting fascism and fighting forces that are ultimately destructive is really what it's about.
Right. We should mention that this story is transposed a bit to Italy in the 1930s. We actually see the character representing Mussolini. I mean, he is Mussolini within the reality of this film. So yeah, there is this whole kind of notion of fascism, and I don't know. I mean, say a little bit more about that. So that's interesting. You kind of extrapolated from there to Ukraine, but this movie does feel very topical to me, very of the moment in a certain way.
Yeah, because this Pinocchio is different from the other Pinocchio, and there's even the other Pinocchio at the beginning of this movie, without any spoilers. And so he's very much in contrast. He's different, and he's not recognized as different at first. He's everyone wants him to be good in the traditional way, and he resists that, and he keeps resisting that, and has an interesting adventure through his resistance and ultimate connection with people, because I think it's also about the need, in that sense. I would say all these movies are sort of pandemic, emerging from the pandemic movies, about the need for connecting with people and the longing that people have, no matter what they say on the outside, to connect with other people.
All right,
but he does it through disobedience,
But I'm being told from the booth, as they say, that Ewan McGregor has actually sung in Moulin Rouge and Down with Love, and actually played Sky Masterson in Guys and Dolls in the West End in London. So there, he can sing, and it's obvious he does a pretty good job with those songs. Although, Carolyn, I think the songs are wrong. I mean, I would have enjoyed these songs in something else. They're actually written by, I think, a composer named Alexander Desplat or something like that. They sound like they're written by Sondheim, kind of the same kind of harmonics. I don't know. It just doesn't really. I don't really know why this is a musical. I think you were wondering that too.
Yeah, I hated that it was a musical. The second that a song started and I realized that this was a musical, I was like, oh no, they found a way to make this worse. And the songs were weird to me. They were creepy and catchy, but not like in a good way. Mm-hmm. You didn't want to be singing it in your head. And for me, I always love a good villain song. I always think villains get the best songs. And the carnival leader guy, his song was the worst. So how can you ruin a villain song? I don't know. I struggled with Pinocchio because I just felt, for me, I loved the technique and how it was made. I actually highly recommend that people watch the making of documentary that is on Netflix. It's like a half-hour long and it interviews Del Toro and cast members and production team, and to see how it's made. And there's an exhibit that's supposed to be really good at MoMA right now with the art from Pinocchio. And I loved it as a piece of art so much. But I felt that the script and especially the songs, it all fell short to me. And I was saying to Irene before the show, I don't want a cartoon to make me cry. I don't want that I don't want to leave a cartoon feeling stressed out or weepy or any of that, depressed, because I'm watching a cartoon for escapism. So I just felt very emotionally violated by this movie.
There's the blurb for the advertising.
You're welcome.
I felt emotionally violated. Carolyn Payne, Entertainment News. All right, Pedro. Well, I mean, there's a lot of things I want to talk about, including I really want to talk about AI. I don't know if you want to talk about that. I don't know that or not. But and I also want to talk about how much Pinocchio in this movie looks like Groot. But I'm the only person who finds that amusing. So, Pedro, I'll just I also know for a fact that although your family watched the other movies with you, you kind of were, I think it sounded like maybe left alone in the living room to get through Pinocchio.
Everyone checked out on this one. So my daughter did not want to see it at all. She saw the trailer and was like, no. And then my wife was like, yeah, we're done. I think it was about after the first. Once the actually, I think after the first or second, about 40 minutes into the movie. And I think that, I mean, overall, what Irene says about this and about the disobedience, I like that version of the movie that you described. I think that's actually really great. And seeing that, I think that was successful in it. But the story itself and the music was weird. Pinocchio's really annoying in the beginning. And I guess now I see why, because they had to make him really insufferable so that you would kind of hate him being bad, but realize that him being bad is actually him being good. However, it just it just didn't resonate. Like this story, it felt like I'm looking at like an old fairy tale story from the 1800s, and now it's in, there's this kind of fascism subplot, and it just, none of it came together in a way that felt like I was seeing this classic story told in kind of like some new way. And I think had it actually been told without music, had it been told maybe a little bit more sort of seriously than like the parts that are like downright depressing or downright nihilistic at the end, I think just would have maybe hit home a little bit more. But the movie just felt all over the place for me.
All right, let's hear a little bit more from the movie, particularly because we're talking about fascism. We are going to hear, this is a cut that features David Bradley as the voice of Geppetto. I just want to say David Bradley, who obviously you don't see in this movie, but the name even sounds vaguely familiar. He's two things. He's two major franchises. He's Walder Frey in A Game of Thrones. But he's also, I don't know what the guy's name is, but he's the guy who's sort of the custodian of Hogwarts. He's the guy the kind of crabby guy who, shows you to a room and kind of grunts.
With the cat.
Yeah, the cat. The guy with the cat. Yeah, he's that guy. Anyway, he's the voice of Geppetto. Gregory Mann is the voice of Pinocchio. And this is A2 Cat.
What will we do?
Oh, don't worry, Papa. I'll go to war. It sounds quite fun. I can learn to fight and fire a weapon and march like
No,
this.
Pinocchio. War is not fun. War is not good. War took Carlo away from me.
Then I simply won't go.
But you have to go now. It's the law.
Even when it's something bad?
Yes, we all have to obey the law, whether we like it or not.
Why?
I don't have time or patience enough to explain that to you. I owe that man a fortune, and you will be taken far away and recruited into military youth camp. And now, look what you've turned me into. I made you to be like Carlo. Why can't you be more like Carlo?
Because I'm not Carlo. I don't want to be like Carlo. Carlo is...
Enough! You are such a burden.
By the way, the leader of the fascists, the non-Mussolini leader of the fascists, the local leader of the fascists is named Podesta, which I found very disorienting. Was he like, Mussolini's campaign manager? Did his emails get hacked? Why did he do that? So Irene, first of all, I'm a little bit more on your side than Pedro and Carolyn might seem to be. Ultimately, this movie did win me over. Although, one thing I did struggle with, and maybe this is just true to the nature of fairy tales, is it doesn't really have a Papulian through line. In the sense anyway that it's very episodic, right? So the fascism subplot comes up and then it goes away and it's replaced by a giant dogfish and then that goes away. And, although there's some steady characters there, for example, the Podesta's son, Candlewick, is kind of built up into an interesting character, and then boom, he's gone. And I sort of thought this could have been in the mood I was in, but I felt like the thing was sort of dabbling in each one of its topics as opposed to kind of holding them all together. I don't know. React to that, though.
Okay, well, I can't completely disagree with you there. And I was thinking that when actually listening to Carolyn and Pedro, I'm thinking, my relationship to quote unquote cartoons or animated films is so I usually don't have much to do with them. So I was sort of thinking I wasn't going to be very drawn to this, and it pulled me in a way because of the things that would pull a regular movie in for me, which is, the psychology, the characterizations, etc., and not even the plot necessarily. But if I think about it in other terms, like I should think about it as an animated film and what it means. I did think it was beautiful in terms of the art of it, but I don't know very much about it, and I wasn't really thinking that much about it. So I kind of maybe forgave those things. But at the same time, the thread, that's why I keep going back to the thread of disobedience, because it's fascism, but it's also, why can't you be more like Carlo? So many children suffer from that attitude on their parents' part. And for me, that goes so far that I want I wanted to see the end of the story, and I felt satisfied at the end of the story, in spite of what Pedro had to say about it, which is kind of an interesting point too. But maybe you could say that, Pedro. But yeah, I mean, so I don't know. Yeah, I actually have to say that I did feel like, why are they doing these songs? Because it wasn't a musical, but then it was a musical for a little bit. So that's another example of what you're saying, Colin, and I have to agree. That even the musical part was kind of like, oh, let's throw in a song, but then they forgot about that.
Right. I'm being told
the movie went on.
I'm being told from the booth that Podesta is actually a title, and so it wasn't even his name. It was the holder of the highest office in the government at that time in the cities of central and northern Italy. During the late.
But for us, it was his name. It's his name.
It's his name.
On.
All right.
Yeah.
So I just don't want to get any emails from people saying, "Don't you even know Podesta's a title?" So. Yeah, I mean, so we have to go very quickly because we have to get over to Puss in Boots here. But Carolyn, just sort of back to the creepiness. I think Pinocchio is inevitably kind of creepy, and just the fact that he's a little wooden boy and then he starts talking. And I don't know if you saw the Spielberg movie AI, but in that movie, Haley Joel Osment's character is very, very he is AI. He is some kind of android, and he is very informed by the story of Pinocchio and sees it as applicable to his own situation. He's always looking for the Blue Angel, and that is one creepy freaking movie. I have just never really kind of shaken it off. But actually, Pedro, since you're laughing, you obviously get it. Maybe I'll address this to you. I have another question for Carol in just a second. But the echoes of that came back to me. It's like, no wonder. It's actually a pretty brilliant thing for the Spielberg movie to have done, to invoke Pinocchio, because all of that kind of uncanny valley stuff is embedded in the folktale.
Yeah, I think, in fact, as sort of like taking Pinocchio into something sort of, I guess, well, now it's 20 years at this point old. I think that one is maybe more successful because of that, because it takes the story and turns it into something different. And yeah, I think AI, I haven't seen it in a few years. And I think I'd be surprised to see how that has aged. And that might have aged actually probably better than we think. But yeah, that is a creepy movie. I didn't like it the first time I saw it. And then the second time I saw it, I was definitely more like, okay, I see it. And I really enjoy it. But it's definitely, it's speaking to Pinocchio, right? What does it mean to be a real boy? I mean, look at all this stuff about AI, and now with like virtual AI on search engines and stuff, I think that there's a lot of questions to be asked there. And I think that, yeah, it turns it. I like I said, I think with AI, you can see the link to Pinocchio pretty clearly. And this movie kind of does drive that point home when you kind of see the differences of what AI did versus where this goes.
Right. And, one point, and this will get me back to Carolyn, about AI is, at least in the conventional sense, AI can't die. If we have relationships, sort of Frank Langella type relationships with artificial intelligences going forward, one thing we're going to have to accept is we're going to die and they won't. And so, Carolyn, in the case of Pinocchio, it's also true. He can't die. He doesn't die. Although we do find out what happens when you sort of die. And I guess it's what happens when people die, too, which is you go to a place where there are bunnies. So we have to talk about the bunnies.
Thank you for bringing up the death bunnies. So the death bunnies came up in a point in this movie where I was literally, it was kind of I need to turn this off. I'm over it. And then the death bunnies came through carrying Pinocchio's coffin, and I fell in love with them. Like, if I was a child, I'd want a toy death bunny to play with. I'd want the stuffed animal of that. They just are this.
What did you love about them? Yeah, I
don't know. They were cute. They were weird. They were so like Del Toro in styling. Like, they had this great, exoskeleton suit on over their cute little bunny fur. And then, it's like after they were done, the little song they were singing, like I said, I love a good villain, creepy song. They had the best song in the movie, probably their little funeral dirge that they were singing. And then they sit down after they deposit the coffin, they just sit down and start playing a card game.
Yeah, that felt like the most Del Toro part of the movie.
Yeah, I was all in for the Death Bunny. So thank you for getting that worked in here, Colin, because I think if you're going to watch this movie, they're a real little gem to look out for.
Right. By the way, the Death Bunnies are voiced by a single person. Tim Blake Nelson is actually the voice of the Death Bunnies. I should also point out that the carnival leader, Count Volpe, whom Carolyn didn't like his song, is played by Christoph Waltz. Yes, he is Count Volpe. Yes, Mr. Bond. I have taken your wooden puppet. All right, so we have to switch. We have to switch gears here to Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. And actually, we're probably going to be staying with Carolyn at the beginning of this because I don't think we really would have done this except that she went to see it very early, partly because of her cat, partly because of her nephew. And so let's hear a little bit about this. This is, of course, an extension of the Puss in Boots line in DreamWorks. It's their second movie. Puss in Boots also appears, I think, in all of the Shrek movies. I think that's kind of how this gets started. And obviously, Puss in Boots, also very, very, very old story. It goes back to the 1500s, I believe. So we're going to hear of course, Antonio Banderas is the voice of Puss in Boots, and Anthony Mendez is the voice of a doctor. This is A3, Cat.
Puss in Boots. How do I say this? You died. Doctor, please.
Relax! I am Puss in Boots! I laugh at death! You see? And anyway, I am a cat. I have 9 lives.
That makes 8, Puss. You are down to your last life. My prescription? No more adventures for you. You need to retire.
Me? Retire? Are you the village comedian as well?
Puss, is there any safe place you can go? Any special someone you can rely on in this moment of need?
I am Puss in Boots, loved by one and all.
Anyone in particular?
I mean, how could I possibly choose?
This is the address of Mama Luna. She is a cat fancier, always on the lookout for a new lap cat. You will be safe there.
Lap cat? I am no lap cat, Doctor. I am Puss in Boots.
Not anymore. Doctor's orders.
All right, so we should say that Salma Hayek comes along. I guess she's Salma Hayek Pinot. I didn't know that. As the voice of Kitty Softpaws, sort of a partner in crime. A really interesting performance by Harvey Guillen as the voice of Perito, a little dog we get to know. Florence Pugh and Olivia Colman are Goldilocks and Mama Bear, respectively. Papa Bear is the Ray Winstone, who's, I think, the big hulking guy in Rome, the HBO series Rome. John Mulaney is Jack Horner. I could go on. But so, Carolyn, I don't know. Tell me a little bit about how you, Harry, your nephew, anybody reacted to this movie.
Well, I was excited to see this because I liked the Shrek franchise, and Puss in Boots is definitely a character I quite enjoyed. I have a soft spot for a roguish orange cat. So I was excited to see this and watched it with my nephew. And this is the kind of cartoon I love because it's not like saccharine. It's not just designed for kids. It has this like darker side. It has some adult themes and humor, but it also is not, forcing you to have all these feels like Pinocchio and Marcel the Shell. But this movie, like I said, because it's darker, my nephew gave the best review of this movie, saying that any one of the fairy tale characters in it would induce nightmares. And that's kind of true. The Jack Horner character is so weird looking. This movie is weird in a wonderful way, and I just think it's really cute, which is what I want. That's what I'm in it for with a cartoon. You have cute kitties, you have some action, you have some funny lines. It's fun. I think this is just a really fun movie.
All right. There should be a new movie rating like ECAP, may contain emotions. Carolyn Payne be warned. So yeah, I don't know, Pedro. This feels to me, although there's a lot of some postmodern stuff going on, and certainly one of the things Shrek did was kind of open the gates to combining all the different characters from fairy tales. Pinocchio as a cameo here. I don't know. What was your overall take?
Yeah, I really liked Puss in Boots, and I went into it not thinking I was going to enjoy it because I think that as I did like Shrek when they first came out. I love the satire and smashing together all the fairy tales. Kind of as that has gone on, I think it's just started to kind of feel like one note. So I was expecting more of that, and to have a story come in again, as in all of the nominees that we're talking about. It's about death. It's about facing the end, and coming to terms with that. And they did it. I thought they did it really well. I really liked. I thought I love. I mean, he's basically like a Zorro character, right? And what do you do with an invincible hero who finds out he's no longer invincible? And what does he fear most? Well, we see what he fears most in the movie, and that's death, and he faces it. And it was. I really, like I said, I really enjoyed it. Thought the music actually was good in this one. The few songs that were in it, and it's kind of like the state of films today. Maybe it's the Pixarification, or maybe it was the Shrekification of taking some heady themes and working it into some, into a fun movie. It just all came together nicely.
Visually, one thing about this, and I'm the person who tends to miss this kind of thing, but it is a slight visual alteration on standard computer animation. And one of the things they apparently were influenced by was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, where there was an effort made to make it look like drawings. In other words, make it a little bit closer to the drawn source material of comic books. And this one, there was an effort to make it look a little bit more like a book illustration, which I didn't really pick up at the time.
Well, and they especially
it switches back and forth.
Yeah, they use that technique during the epic battle between Puss and the Death Wolf. And I thought that was really cool. It added a lot to the scene and gave it that kind of graphic novel comic book reference.
Right. So Irene, you haven't been heard from about Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and I don't know what question to ask you either.
Okay, well, just on the visual, I love the way the map changed depending on who was looking at it. That was beautiful, the way it worked, and the way it, and little Perito, who was always cheerful, his map changed to a cheerful map. That was great. And I also can't, since I'm the characterization person, I love the, like little Jack Horner, who used to be little Jack Horner and turned into greedy, horrible, self-satisfied, corporation, always wanting more kind of a character. And I didn't even know it was John Mulaney until afterwards, and that made it even better. And he got what he deserved, but he just wanted more. That came across so really well. And the idea of male vulnerability was interesting, I thought, and connected to aging. I can't be the Puss in Boots that I used to be. And also, his whole love story was kind of fun to follow, how he sort of evolved, let's say, as a man in terms of his own vulnerability. I thought was kind of interesting.
All right, so that's Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, another Oscar nominee. We got to take a break, so we'll have time for Marcel the Shell with Shoes On.
Brave and ready for trouble. Are you all? Who's so unbelievably humble? Are you all?
We're back. This is The Nose. We're talking about 3 of the Oscar-nominated animated films, and we are doing this with Carolyn Payne, Irene Papoulis, and Pedro Soto. So last, but hardly least, is Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. This is a hard one to describe unless you were familiar with the YouTube video shorts, which preceded it. But Marcel is about a 1-inch shell, maybe the kind of shell that ordinarily a hermit crab might inhabit. But instead we see Marcel's eyeball. He's kind of a little kid. He's voiced by Jenny Slate. This is very much another story about loss. It's a story also about aging and death and wanting to protect an elderly relative whom you both need and also do feel like you need to shelter. And we'll hear a little bit of it right here. You're going to hear the 2 main voices Jenny Slate is the voice of Marcel, who is a stop motion animation. And then Dean Fleischer Camp, who is sort of, well, he's the human being most frequently in this movie, and he is played by himself as a real human being in live action. This is complicated. He's also the director of the movie, and it turns out just Jenny Slate's ex-husband. So here we go. Here's Marcel B1.
Is it hard for you? Has it been hard for you since?
Not in the way that I think you would think it would be, but it's pretty much common knowledge that it takes at least 20 shells to have a community. That's the minimum you need to survive, so I think at first I was thinking, we're not gonna make it. But sometimes you just have to disregard those rules and think, well, actually the rule is that I want to be having a good life and stay alive and not just survive, but have a good life. Back when the man and the woman lived here, there were a lot of us. More sounds and smells and things to say, because there were more people to talk to. These days, it's quieter.
All right, and there's a little bit of the premise of the movie in there. Marcel comes from a much larger family or flock of shells, but most of them have disappeared. They disappeared when the married couple who had been living in the house broke up. We find out exactly how and why that happened. I don't know if it would be a spoiler to tell you, but I won't take that chance. So Pedro, just tell me a little bit about how you and possibly everybody else in your house reacted to Marcel.
I love this movie, and I think that this was a movie where I think, my family was definitely like interested. It was like, well, what is this? Kind of curious. And then the story, the humor, the emotion in the movie really grabbed everyone. And this might have been the favorite, I think, of the house. I'd have to ask again this weekend, but I think after seeing this one, that was the general consensus. And I think that you can kind of hear it in that clip. But taking what started out as a YouTube video and turning it into this meditation of, there's definitely some pandemic talking in there, but meditation on loss and aging and fear, and what it means to be alone and what it means to then be, with people again. I think it was really beautifully done. The meta stuff in the movie I felt was a little bit clunky. So every time we were in the world where it was just them and the documentarian, I was really engaged. And then, as they start to spin it out a little bit more, it got a little bit rough, but I thought it really just ends in a beautiful place.
Yeah, I mean, Carolyn, I hate to say it, but I could sort of imagine one of those books they sell by the cash register in bookstores and maybe other stores, just sort of quotations. Marcel is very philosophical, says things like, it's always what they say on the days when you have a really keen sense of being lost or losing something, that it often feels like the sun shines the brightest. And it was a really sunny day with a good breeze. And I just remember thinking, if I was somebody else, I would really be enjoying this. And there's like a lot of those in there, Carolyn. And I will say I was completely beguiled by all of that, by not only Marcel, but his attempt to have an outlook on life. How about you?
I think that was one of the things that I found most compelling with this. I did like, my favorite line was Marcel is talking about the dog missing, seeing something truly elegant, and then said of the dog, what a sad type of idiot. And I loved that. I think that's how I'm going to now start insulting people. I'm going to call them sad types of idiots. But I found myself, I found a whole webpage that has Marcel the Shell quotes. And there's really a quote for everything. It's really a lot to digest, a lot to take in there. And I mean, this movie was interesting to me. So I remember like a decade or so ago when Marcel the Shell hit YouTube and everyone was sharing it on their social media and acting like it was the greatest thing. And I remember just not really getting it. I was like, it's a shell wearing shoes. Like, why? And I think Jenny Slate brings so much to this. And I think but I don't know if we really needed the whole movie of Marcel the Shell. I think that it's well done for what it is, and it is very it's visually unique. And I mean, the concept of this little tiny shell, which essentially is a piece of trash, like living in this house and walking around and having all this like deep, these deep philosophical little sound bites. It's fascinating. But I found myself wanting now a movie of, do you guys know who Henri the cat is from YouTube?
Yes.
It's a cat. Yes, the cat, the existential cat. Yeah, if Marcel the Shell gets a movie, Henri the existential cat should now get a movie as well.
You should be calling your agent or Harry the cat's agent. Prince
Yeah,
Harry's
I don't know if he'd be great for that role. I don't know if he can really express that kind of ennui, maybe with some good acting coaching. But yeah, I recommend an early endorsement for me. This movie had me going nostalgic for Henri the existential cat.
So Irene, to Carolyn's point, it is sort of true that 5 minutes of Puss in Boots, The Last Wish, has more going on in it probably than the entire 90 minutes, or however long Marcel is. Although I think that's kind of the point, right? This is sort of slow food. This is a much more meditative movie about what it's like to be alive on an average day, not alive on a day when a death wolf is trying to kill you.
Absolutely. I have to say that when I first, for the first 5 minutes or so, I said, how am I possibly going to get through 90 minutes of this? It's like a tiny little, and it's not a cartoon, which I thought it was going to be. It's this tiny little shell in a real house, walking around or rolling around, thinking about things and talking. And I just wasn't. But then his grandmother, whose voice I did recognize, Isabella Rossellini, and she does such a beautiful job of being the character and just who the character is. And I sort of got into I didn't want it to hurry up. I wanted it to keep going. And I love, and we heard it in the clip too, the way no one ever says, but you're a shell. What is this? What do you mean? You're just this thing living in the drawer. It's as though the movie takes them completely seriously as, legitimate, not necessarily people, but they could just as well have been people. And that is a kind of an interesting just nuttiness that I didn't know anything about the YouTube thing or anything. I just sort of came to it cold, and it's like, okay, a shell is a character. All right, a shell is a character with all these feelings. And Isabella Rossellini is, an aging grandmother who's also who sort of has dementia, but she's also got all this wisdom that she's, and desire to help Marcel. And like, okay, it wasn't, and then Leslie Stahl came into it, which I thought was really fun.
Although, do you notice that, first of all, I love it, Leslie Stahl, and I've actually worked with Leslie Stahl, and she's an absolutely lovely person. Although, did you notice that she didn't really have a scene with Marcel? They sort of cut from her about to talk to Marcel to being done with Marcel. And I think, if you think about Muppets, the old Muppet TV show, there were people who could the trick to that, if you were the guest, was you just had to talk to the Muppets like they were people, and I mean, Dizzy Gillespie treated the Muppets like just people in his band, I mean, he didn't, and he looked like a Muppet anyway, with the cheeks all blown out. But I just wondered, maybe Leslie was just not able to do that, because one thing I can tell you is there was no shell there. I mean, they had like a little shell on a stick. They had to shoot the live action separately and then add the stop motion. They had to shoot the movie twice, essentially, and combine the two in order to make this work. And so maybe it just was a little bit more than Leslie could handle. But she's a good sport for doing it, as you pointed out.
So she did kind of have a deadpan attitude of, the way she was asking the questions and everything, that I thought was really good, just as though she's asking anyone else a question.
Right.
But yeah, she had to do it in a studio by herself or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. I was kind of disappointed that Nathan Fielder, who just has a little thing at the end, voicing one of the shells, a shell named Justin, didn't have. Nathan Fielder's perfect for this project. They should have beefed up his part considerably.
Is that the guy from the rehearsal?
Yes.
He's the guy that did the rehearsal. Yeah, I was thinking it sort of reminded me of that. Just a completely wacky idea that you never would have thought of. but they thought of it and they went for it
He's
in a
the
way
shell.
that you have to admire.
He's the shell
Yeah.
near the end and the family reunion. He's having a little trouble walking down the wall with the sticky stuff
his
on
brother.
It's
Yeah.
his brother.
The brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So we have to stop there. But I think we all recommend this movie. Get past those first 5 minutes. You're going to be fine. All right. We need time to make some endorsements on the other end. That's what we're going to do. We'll take a break. We'll be back. Time to say thank you to Cat Pastor, who's not Puss in Boots, a different kind of cat entirely, but a wonderful cat who's our technical producer, and also to Jonathan McPants, who does wear shoes in addition to pants, and is the producer of this particular episode and all episodes of The Nose whenever possible. All right, time to make some recommendations. So, Pedro Soto, why don't you get us going?
Okay. So I'm sticking with animation for this one well-known and one pretty deep cut. The first is, as actually you mentioned earlier, but I think a movie which is one of my favorite animated movies in the last 10 years, and that is Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse. And that's a movie which takes a existing property and tells it in a fresh new way. Kind of like what Pinocchio, I think, tried to do, and tells a story. So it's the, obviously classic Peter Parker story. So if you haven't seen it because you don't want to see another superhero movie, go see it because it's an absolutely beautiful movie. Also, one with really strong, if you want to see a movie that has good representation of, other people, minorities, people that look like you, this is really a perfect movie for that. So I do suggest that. The second is, so if you want some claymation, stop motion animation that's really weird, there's a Mark Twain claymation movie that came out in 1985. And I believe it's just called The Adventures of Mark Twain. And it was out in the theaters for apparently like 2 or 3 weeks, which I saw in the theaters when I was 8. So apparently I'm one of the very few people who've seen it in the theater. It is a weird, wild trip. It's obviously with Mark Twain. So there's him from being Connecticut, which is another reason I recommended it. But it's a weird story. I think you can find it online somewhere. And it is, like I said, it's hard to describe, but it's basically Mark Twain's stories told as a narrator with claymation, and it will be a fun weekend rabbit hole to go down. Okay, that is all.
All right, McPants has already found the poster for it, put it up on my Slack. Into the Spider-Verse, that Spider-Man movie is amazing. My son and I saw it at Trinity, and it just really is a remarkable thing. It even makes you like Post Malone, and that's not easy to do. All right, so Carolyn, what are you going to recommend?
So I will also recommend another animated movie, and this is another one of the Oscar-nominated movies for this year, is Disney Pixar's Turning Red. I loved this movie. I feel like it didn't really get the talk. It got a lot of talk because there was some pushback because it deals with a young girl getting her period. And I think that that's kind of a topic that a lot of people are like, get all weird talking about, but I think it's so important. And I found this movie so relatable. The girl in it reminded me of me in those early teen years where you have those hormones turning you into a crazy monster, fighting with your mother and just being generally, wild. And it's just this great way to look at coming of age and being a woman and all these things. And I thought it was so creative. And it was also the first Pixar movie to have a full entire team of all female creatives working on it, which was really cool. So I recommend that one.
Oh, great. Thanks so much for doing that. And Irene Papoulis, what are you going to recommend to us?
I have two quick ones. One is if you feel like going to a local play this weekend, go see Indecent. This is the last weekend of it. It's playing at the Playhouse on Park in West Hartford, and it's just such a wonderful experience. It's about Yiddish theater in Eastern Europe. It's about anti-Semitism and it's about homophobia, and those are very serious issues. But they make it playful and fun, and it's serious, but it's also really fun to watch. There's a lot of moving around. People play different parts. There's singing, there's dancing that's really top notch, and it's a very fun show. And this is the last weekend that it's going to be there. And also, just on the theme of aging, it has nothing to do with movies, but I've been reading this set of 3 novellas by Simone de Beauvoir called "The Woman Destroyed," and it's such an interesting glimpse into the head of a woman who's not necessarily a sympathetic character at all, but she's in a long marriage. She thinks about it, the way the marriage works out, her attitude toward her child, who's growing up, and she can't deal with it. It's just one of those novellas. I read it I went to Chicago last week and I read it on the plane and I just couldn't stop reading it. It's a page turner and a very serious, though, dive into somebody's head. That is great. It's called The Woman Destroyed.
So I want to mention, first of all, that there are 2 award ceremonies coming up in the next few days. I don't think we as viewers are invited to either one of them. One of them is the Annies, which is tomorrow night. It's for animated movies, and it's some of the 2 of the movies that we talked about, the Del Toro, Pinocchio, and Marcel, I think are heavy favorites in a bunch of categories. So that's kind of an interesting thing. And then just a few days later, I think on Tuesday, there's the Audies, and the Audies are the awards for audiobooks, and they include awards for performances. I was, by the way, amused to note today that the Irish detective novelist Adrian McKinty, whom I've kind of become friends with on Twitter, was saying that one of his books is nominated and he didn't know that they were so fancy, these awards, and he doesn't own a tie and he's going to go buy one because they have an open bar and Paul Bloody Simon, he says, is going to be there. But anyway, one of the books that's nominated for an Audie is The Maid by Nita Prose. And this is kind of a mystery novel. The protagonist is a hotel maid. She is non-neurotypical. It's never entirely spelled out what exactly that amounts to, although some of it amounts to some pretty excessive ideas about cleaning. And she gets swept up due to her innocence and her inability to sort of read some of the social cues in certain situations. She gets swept up into just a terrible murder. And I want to mention, not only is this a really, really good book, but the audio version is read/performed by Lauren Ambrose, who is up for an Audie for that and is remarkable. This is the kind of audiobook that wouldn't have worked if you didn't find the voice of this character, because the character of the maid is the first-person narrator of this book, and it's just so vital. If it's going to be an audiobook, the person has to kind of nail that character because she's going to be in our head for 8-10 hours, however long the book is. And Lauren Ambrose just did a remarkable job, not only with that voice, but other voices in the book as well. So it's The Maid. It was a bestseller last year. I'm kind of late to this party a little bit, but it also fits with these award ceremonies that are coming up. All right, so it is time for us to say goodbye, but thank you so much for listening to The Nose. We hope you'll be back next week. I have no idea what we'll be doing. We're going to figure that out in just a couple of hours.
I see you on the radio. Let me tell you, baby. I'll meet you down on a sidewalk, across from St. Francis, past the conservatory, up the street from the seminary. It's a very, very, very cool place to hang out. Yeah. It's cozy, like a Cracker Barrel. Yeah, we'll be laughing, talking, joking, talking about this and talking about that, and talk about everything as a matter of fact. Oh, yeah. Talk about Torrington, Vernon, Danbury, Waterbury, Alderberry, Woodbury, hitting on New Britain, Vernon, I already said that one, Avon, Farmington, yeah. On the radio. See you on the radio. On the radio, baby. You and me talking, laughing down on College Mac and Roll. I see you on the radio.
you can get the best event